My name is Max. I am the owner and behavioral health director of Prism Integrated Health here in Austin, Texas, joined by Cindy Dallow, who is a new member of our team. She's helping us kick off the medical nutrition program at Prism. And so we are just going to get to know each other because really, I mean, Cindy, I interviewed you, I hired you, you did onboarding, but we have not had a whole lot of time to chat. And so we are going to be getting to know each other just as in real time with everybody else.
Awesome. Sounds
Yeah.
great.
So,
Trying to hook my
go
phone.
ahead, introduce yourself, give us your pronouns, and then I guess start by telling us 3 things that are important for folks to know about you. Sure can.
Okay. Well, hi, everybody. Yes, I am Cindy Dallow. I'm a dietitian, and I have been a dietitian for, I don't know, 30 some years. And I'm super excited to be a part of Prism Integrated Health because, well, for a lot of reasons. I just feel that mental health and nutrition and eating have some things in common. And in my years of working as a dietitian, I have come to realize that mental health is a huge part of obviously overall health, but that our thoughts about food, our bodies, our health integrate just very well with mental health. So it's a great connection, and I really look forward to working with Max and any clients who are interested in pursuing some help.
Sure. And so you have a really interesting history in the world of dietetics and health at every size and intuitive eating. So tell us about your journey.
Sure.
RD.
Sure. Yeah, I originally got into nutrition because my father had a heart attack when I was in high school and had bypass surgery, and my mom had to change her diet. And I just became interested in how nutrition affects our health way back in that was mid 70s. So that's how I got started. But then I ended up working in a hospital and doing a lot of outpatient counseling, most of which was weight loss. And as a dietitian, I was taught to give people, 1,200 calorie diets, with the exchange lists and all that kind of stuff. And I never really felt good about that from the beginning, but I was too young and kind of too naive to really know what else I could do. And so I would hand out these diets and teach people how to lose weight. And I, actually saw people lose weight, and, everything seemed to be fine. But then I would see people later on, the people that I had worked with and helped, and notice that they had regained most of the weight that they had lost, and felt terrible about themselves, as if they had failed.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I had my own eating issues, my own, inflexibility with eating and not liking how that felt. And over time, this is back in the 80s, over time, I just came to realize that dieting doesn't work. Well, it works short term. Mm-hmm. Anybody can lose weight. I can give anybody any kind of diet, low fat, high carbohydrate, low carb, whatever. It doesn't matter. If it's low in calories, most people are going to lose some weight. The thing is, what happens is most people can't keep it off. Then it becomes this cycle of lose and regain, lose and regain. And, there's people I've heard say, well, that's okay. You should just keep trying. But it takes a toll. That takes a toll on our mental health. And a lot of people that I worked with and have talked to over the years, they would blame themselves for that, when in reality it's very difficult for the human body to maintain a weight loss. That our brains have, we have a biological drive to reestablish the weight that we were at before. And so we're fighting biology to keep the weight off. It's not easy. Weight loss is actually easier than maintaining a weight loss.
Mm-hmm.
And I also learned throughout the years that, it was causing more harm than good
Mm-hmm.
to push for weight loss. At the same time, I started becoming involved with some people who were, I actually learned about intuitive eating and started doing it myself.
Mm-hmm.
Loved it. And I've been an intuitive eater ever since, for 30 years now. But what I was going to say is I went back to grad school and I started following this research that showed that fit people with a high cardiorespiratory fitness level, but who may be considered overweight or have a high BMI, outlived thin, skinny, unfit people. And so I became very interested in the cardiorespiratory fitness aspect of health, which is only one as part of health, but it was just an area that I was interested in. And I at first had a hard time believing it, and ended up actually speaking at conferences with some of the people who did this research. And now I'm a firm believer that you can be healthy at a wide range of sizes and shapes. Health is not based on weight. So, I mean, that's a very, maybe a long answer to your question, but it just, and I became involved with the people who started the Health at Every Size movement, and saw people and worked with people who became, in my mind, very healthy. And I don't know how there's so many definitions to health, but who were maybe by society standards large sized, but they were fit, they were active, they felt great, they had energy, their cholesterol and blood pressure and blood sugar was all in line with what's considered to be healthy. And so, and then of course I knew people who were thin and not that way. So I just believe that physical, mental, social, sexual health is all dependent on so many different factors. It really needs to be individualized.
Yeah. Yeah. For those of us who are not in nutrition, what is, cardiorespiratory health?
Oh, good question. That's something I'm just very interested in. So cardiorespiratory fitness, or CRF, is a measure of basically our cardiovascular, cardiorespiratory system, and how fit we are. So when I think of fitness, I think of what somebody's CRF level is, which is determined, unfortunately, the best way to determine your CRF level is by a treadmill test, and that's not the most convenient way. But there are some other ways. You can do a 1 mile walk test on a track. I can talk about those in a little while. But what the research showed clearly over and over was that people who have a moderate to high CRF level outlived people who had a low CRF level, regardless of body weight, shape, or size.
Yeah.
And the man that's done most of this research is Stephen Blair. He used to be in Texas at the Cooper Institute. I think that's in Dallas. He's done the majority of this research, he and his team, and they have followed thousands of people for years. These are not just small studies. These are huge NIH-funded studies. And they found very clearly that both men and women who had a high CRF level, had a high fitness level, but happened to maybe have a higher weight or BMI. And I'm not a fan of BMI, but that was one of the measures they used. Like I said, outlived those people who were skinny and unfit. So I am a big believer in fitness from the cardiorespiratory standpoint. Not from what society, I think some people think of fitness as somebody who has six-pack abs or, runs marathons or whatever. That's that's not it at all.
Mhm.
So yeah, so that's something that I'm very interested in. I like to help people find a healthy way of living and eating, regardless of what their weight is or
Mhm.
BMI or any of
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
So
Right on. So, who benefits? Like, what type of person can benefit from working with a registered dietitian? What are some common things that you see?
well, most of the people I see, I do mostly work with women. I guess more women, or people who identify as women come to me. It's not that women have more issues with body and weight. I just think they may be more likely to seek help. Um, but they come to me for weight loss a lot of times because they hear a dietitian and they think, oh, she's going to help me lose weight. So I get requests for that all the time.
Mhm.
Or I have had quite a few people um, come to me because they're tired of dieting and they're tired of worrying about their weight and they're tired of the emphasis on weight, and they want to learn to just eat intuitively and live healthy and enjoy their lives. So I kind of have both. And
Okay,
then I also work with athletes. I do work with triathletes and runners on sports nutrition. So I
right
have a
on.
little bit of that.
So, tell me a little bit about what intuitive eating means. Like, at the line, what does that mean?
Sure. That's a very good question. And a lot of people, I think, don't know what intuitive eating means. It is somewhat of a vague term. Um, it's kind of a way of eating and thinking about food in your body that is more internally based than externally based. So, you know, we all know there's all kinds of diets that are out there, and there's keto, there's blanking on the most popular one right now, but there's all kinds of diets, right? We all know that. That's and when you go on a diet, it's a very external way of thinking. Okay, I need to eat carbohydrates at lunch or protein at dinner, and whatever. You're following all these external rules,
Hmm.
and you're totally ignoring what your body is telling you. You're ignoring when you're hungry, ignoring when you're full. In fact, the diet culture teaches us to ignore hunger. We hear things all the time about, control your appetite, control your urges to eat, control your cravings.
Hmm.
It's crazy. Intuitive eating is really more about learning to trust your body,
Hmm.
trust your internal cues for hunger and fullness and satisfaction, to pay attention to them, to become more attuned
Hmm.
to hunger and fullness and satisfaction. And fullness and satisfaction are not the same thing. They overlap, but they're not the same thing. And so intuitive eating really tries to take away the external, all the stuff we hear, like you should only eat this and you should only eat that, or should intermittent fasting was the one I was trying to think of.
Hmm.
You shouldn't eat until 11 and eat and stop eating when you're 6 o'clock. And it's very external. So intuitive eating is the opposite. It's learning to listening to what your body says, respecting what your body says, and eating according to your internal cues for hunger and fullness.
Okay.
It's more, there's more to it, but I think that's kind of the crux of intuitive eating.
So, a lot like therapy, right? You have to start learning to listen to yourself.
Yes. Yes. It's a very inward based way of eating.
Hmm.
It does require it doesn't require meditation, but meditation fits very well with intuitive eating, or at least centering yourself before a meal and being present and
Hmm.
paying attention. And that's one part of intuitive eating that I teach, is helping people to be more present and just being more attuned to what their body is telling them, and to trust it, and to not try to control it, because
Hmm.
we really can't control our appetite. I mean,
Yeah.
our appetite is biologically driven.
Hmm.
We can't control that. We really can't control our weight either. The
Hmm.
only thing that we can really control are our choices, right?
Yep.
And intuitive eating is just becoming more internally based. But there is a part of intuitive eating that I think a lot of people don't know about. The 10th principle of intuitive eating is called gentle nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we do talk about nutrition and what does the body require to be healthy? What does your body need? Nutrition is important, that's for
Mm-hmm.
sure. And it's just one part of intuitive eating, though. It's not the entire part, which most diets, I think, it's all about what macronutrients you should have, when you should eat, what you shouldn't eat, all these rules.
Mm-hmm.
And I work very hard with the clients that I work with to not listen to those rules anymore.
Mm-hmm. So, talk to me about the difference between fullness and satisfaction. You'd mentioned
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. They overlap. If it's a Venn diagram, you're going to see the overlap in the middle. Fullness is when our body is, when we reach a comfortable level of fullness. That's when we've reached a level of fullness or satiety that feels good.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can all relate to that when we've had a meal that is filling, and we get to this point where we feel full. And that's one thing that I do with clients, is help them rate their fullness on a scale of 1 to 10 so that they can become more in tune with fullness.
Mm-hmm.
And learning to stop eating when you get to this level of comfortable fullness.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, not all the time, because then that's another form of rigidity and rules. There's going to be times that we eat past the feeling of fullness. That's normal eating in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
But more often than not, if you can learn to stop eating when you are comfortably full, then it actually helps with appetite regulation. It definitely helps you feel better. And once you learn to stop eating at that point, regardless of the amount of food it took to get there, and that's another thing that takes a little while to work on, it's great. You just learn to stop eating at that point and you move on with your life.
Yeah.
Now, satisfaction is similar to fullness, but different in that, I think we've all had a meal where we say, boy, that just hit the spot. It just had just the right, sweetness or saltiness or savoriness or whatever. It's just, so good.
Mm-hmm.
That's satisfaction. And satisfaction is very important, because we could all eat until, we're full, but if we're not really satisfied, most of the time we're going to be back in the kitchen looking for more food. Mm-hmm. I think, if you think about a time when you've had a meal that you got full on, but it didn't satisfy you, just didn't hit the spot.
Yeah.
What happens is you start looking for something else to satisfy you. So one thing that I work with my clients on, is to aim for fullness and satisfaction in most meals. Now, the reality is we're not all going to have that perfect, satisfying meal all the time. Life is crazy. Life is busy. It's not always going to happen, unfortunately. But to think about that, and to think about what would be satisfying for me. In fact, I do have a checklist that I like to use with people that I work with, it's only like 5 things, but one is, are there foods in this meal that will satisfy me? Chronic dieters tend to think of, I should just have a salad and baked chicken. Well, you can become full on a salad and baked chicken, but are you really going to be satisfied? Unless that's really what you want. But if you're really wanting pizza, are you going to sit down and have this meal that you think you're supposed to have on this diet? Is that going to be satisfying? Probably not, which means then you're going to end up eating mindlessly throughout the afternoon. And then that doesn't feel good, because you're eating not because you're hungry, but because you just didn't get satisfied. So that is one thing that I encourage people to do, to think about paying attention to fullness and learning to stop when they feel full, but to also think about satisfaction with the meals that they choose, the food that they buy, and just how they eat. The satisfaction is important.
Yeah. And so it seems like, bringing this back to a mental health perspective, like, particularly when folks are trying to adhere to a diet, there's a lot of shame involved, right? Particularly
Yeah,
if we're doing a
yeah,
mind thing in the afternoon because we didn't eat the satisfactory
yeah,
thing, the
yeah.
satisfying thing earlier, right? So it seems like, really, when we eat the satisfying thing, then it cuts off the opportunity to have that shame cycle.
Exactly. Exactly. It does. And I think, and this doesn't come easy. I think this is something that people have to work on. And I do believe it helps to work with somebody who is trained in intuitive eating.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you have to give yourself permission to eat anything you want. Give yourself permission to eat the foods that you love, whether it's a Big Mac, whether it's, ice cream or whatever, food that society might deem as quote unquote unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
If that's what you want, then you should eat it. But
Mm-hmm.
eat it in a positive and intentional way,
Mm-hmm.
not in this kind of chaotic fast, okay, I'm going to eat this now. And that's what people do sometimes, is they eat fast and kind of chaotically
Mm-hmm.
because they feel ashamed and they feel like, I shouldn't be doing this.
Mm-hmm.
But if you learn to slow down, center yourself, pay attention to hunger and fullness, and this is a process that
Right.
most people, it doesn't happen overnight, but and give yourself permission to enjoy those foods. Food loses its power. I mean, it kind of becomes a non-issue after a while. Like, yeah, I'm gonna have pizza if I want it. I'm gonna have, Big Mac if I want it. But
Mm-hmm.
once you've kind of taken on the framework that intuitive eating teaches, you start to develop this respect for your body and what your body needs, and you're not going to function well if you eat fast food all the time. There's no doubt, fast food is not the greatest for your health. That's true.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also fine to have once in a while. It's how you eat it, not that you eat it. It's how
Mm-hmm.
you eat it and how you feel about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but
Yeah, so it seems like what you're telling me is that we go through the shame spiral, right? Of like eating. I think what you're trying to do is reframe this idea of indulgence.
yes,
Like, because often the things that we want to eat are considered indulgent. Ice cream, fast food,
right, right,
right? And
right.
so when we remove that definition and we say, okay, it's just a thing I'm going to eat, part of my diet, right? Like, this is what I'm putting in my diet, my body, for the nutrition for the day. Then it takes away that shame, and it takes away that value system associated with
It
food.
does. It does. And then I was going to say I think, but I actually have seen this happen. When people remove the shame and
Mm-hmm.
allow themselves to eat what they really want, those foods that they really want become less of a temptation. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, they're still going to have them, but it's not as big of a deal, basically.
Yeah.
And they start paying attention to how well they feel if they, after eating certain foods, whether they're, fruits and vegetables or pizza, and just how they feel after eating certain foods, and kind of come to a place where, yeah, I'm going to have a Big Mac, or I'm going to have pizza, or I'm going to have, whatever it is, ice cream. But I also know that I feel good when I'm getting the nutrients that my body needs
Mm-hmm.
to function.
Right.
I feel better that way. And I also feel better when I eat when I'm hungry. And it's a good thing to eat when I'm hungry. I feel good that way. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel really good if I stop when I'm full and I just go about my day. That feels good to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really learning to let go of those rules, giving yourself permission to enjoy the foods that you truly love,
Mm-hmm.
eat them in an intentional, positive way,
Mm-hmm.
but then to move on.
Yeah.
To not overthink it, not dwell on it. And in fact, one part of the definition of normal eating that Ellen Satter wrote many years ago that I love, one part of that definition is food is important and it becomes an important part of your day, but it's not the most important thing. And you learn to put it in its place, if that makes sense, that you want to enjoy food, you want to get the food that you want, but it's not the be all end all. It's not the way that we should cope with our feelings, of course. And you can just kind of move on with your life and not dwell on, did I eat the right thing? Did I eat too many calories? Did I get too much fat? Did I eat too many carbs? Which are the things that I hear from people all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I don't know if that explains it, but
yeah, it does. Thank you. So then tell me how intuitive eating and health at every size fit together.
Yes. Okay. They are very, very much aligned. Health at every size is kind of a term that there was a group of us back in the late 90s that got together. It's not, maybe the perfect phrase, but I think it worked well enough. Basically, health at every size means that you don't have to be a certain weight or certain size to be healthy, basically.
Mm-hmm.
That you can be healthy at a range of sizes and shapes. And kind of getting back to the cardiorespiratory fitness part, you cannot judge somebody's health by their size. Mm-hmm. I have worked with some very large women who are very fit and very healthy, very large, people who are very healthy and fit. So the term health at every size came from research, mm-hmm. like on the fitness and so forth. But also just the belief that health is not just the absence of disease. There's so many factors that go into overall health and wellness. And it is not based on a number on the scale. And intuitive eating it believes that as well, that, and intuitive eating kind of came out of the belief and the research that showed that the constant pursuit of weight loss is not only ineffective in the long run, because most people gain the weight back, but is harmful. Mm-hmm. There's some studies showing that the psychological health, our psychological or mental health, is damaged by the constant weight cycling, losing and regaining and losing and regaining. And that it's not good for our mental or physical health. So intuitive eating, both intuitive eating and health at every size are more focused on other things than the scale. The scale is not an indicator of health. So they both are aligned that way. But intuitive eating definitely is more focused on kind of how you eat, how you think about food, and how you think about your body. And health at every size is kind of encompasses some other aspects of health.
Okay, cool. So you're an athlete, you're a triathlete, you work with athletes, right? And so how does this mindset that is very different from what traditional athletes are taught, right?
Yes.
And I was an athlete, right? Like I played sports in college and did the whole thing. And so there's a very fixed mindset around food and what it means.
Oh, yes.
And so yes. How do you bring this knowledge around intuitive eating, health at every size, to reframe those conversations with athletes?
Very good question. And it does depend a lot on obviously their background, their beliefs, which is something that we spend a lot of time talking about. Their beliefs about their body, about food, about weight is a big issue, especially in certain sports. I mostly work with triathletes and runners, but I have worked with collegiate sports a little bit in the past. It is somewhat difficult, especially in the aesthetic or sports that people believe you should be a certain weight and body size and shape to do that sport.
Mhm.
Um, but what I have found with like runners and cyclists, and both of those tend to have a lot of beliefs about weight and their performance. What it comes down to, I mean, honestly, what it comes down to with a lot of athletes is they get injured,
Mhm.
maybe a stress fracture,
Yeah.
or for some young women I've worked with, they've stopped menstruating, and they don't have the energy to to perform the way that they want to,
Mhm.
and so they kind of learn on their own
Mhm.
that they need to eat if they want to perform well, and that they can do really well even at a higher weight than what they thought.
Mhm.
It does take time with certain athletes. It's
Sure.
definitely not an overnight thing, and it takes a team of people. That's another thing, is that it usually takes a team, which is why I'm excited to work with Prism, because there's a
Mhm.
team of people.
Mhm.
um, a dietitian can't do all of that, but in the triathlon and running world, especially the triathlons, it's amazing the range of sizes and shapes I see now at races.
Mhm.
It is so refreshing to see larger size people out there, or people who don't look like the stereotypical runner or triathlete,
Mhm.
um, in races now. I would say it's almost the norm now that you just see people of all sizes and shapes doing, marathons, 5Ks, triathlons. So I think the word is getting out there, and I think there's a lot of people who are pushing back on that, belief that you have to be, have six pack abs to do well in any of these kinds of sports.
Sure.
So it's out there. I just help people learn to eat, to how nutrition can help fuel their body, help them feel good if they want to do a race. I want them to finish with a smile on their face. I want them to finish thinking that felt good, that was fun,
Mhm.
rather than finishing and feeling miserable because they didn't eat enough.
Mhm.
So there's a lot more that goes into it, but I think for a lot of the triathletes that I work with, they're starting to see that there's large size people out there. And I just mentioned large size because that's kind of the opposite of what most people think of a triathlete.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're starting to see that out there, and they're starting to feel more comfortable, which is a
Mhm.
good thing.
Mhm. It is.
Yeah.
So let's pull back a little bit
Sure.
and let's talk about what it's actually like to be in a session or a meeting with you. So like, a lot of people we all have feelings about food. We all have feelings about our bodies. And then
Yes.
much like taking like mental health therapy, there's a lot of reticence or hesitance or ambivalence about starting that process because there's just so much and it's
Yeah.
deeply ingrained culturally. And so what's like a first session with you like? What are the things that you do? What are the papers you send? Walk
Okay.
us through what that first meeting would be like.
Okay. Um, well, I do have a couple of questionnaires that I usually have people fill out before they meet with me, just so I have a sense of who they are and what they're wanting, what
Mhm.
they want out of the session, what their goals are. So some of that's on the questionnaires.
Mhm.
Um, and then now I'm pretty much meeting with people virtually. So we meet, like this.
Mhm.
And I ask a lot of questions in the first session because there's just a lot I want to know about a client so that I know how I can help them.
Mhm.
So I would say the first half hour is just me asking a lot of questions and listening to what the client wants, what the client believes about eating, about their weight, about um, their health,
Mhm.
what kind of barriers they're facing.
Mhm.
That's a big one that I try to listen to, is what gets in their way in terms of living the kind of life that they want to live. Is it finances?
Mhm.
Is it shame?
Mhm.
Is it proximity to whatever it is that they want to do. I mean, there's all kinds of barriers. So I really want to listen to what their goal is. What do they want to accomplish? What do they want me to help them with? What's getting in their way? Um, and what are some small steps that we could take to help them achieve whatever goal it is that they have, or whatever they want to do. I'm a huge believer in small steps. You know, if you've ever read the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, he talks about the 1%, how impactful just 1% change is. Small steps can have a huge impact over time. So I just work with clients to help them. We decide together what the goal is, what kind of steps we want to take to achieve that goal. We talk about, you know, it's a lot of times it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You know, nobody can just wake up the next day and all of a sudden, you know, be able to do all the things that they want to do. We talk about small steps, small goals, but also a lot about changing thoughts about our food, thoughts about ourselves, listening to how we speak to ourselves. Self-talk is a big thing that I like to talk to people about it when it comes to food and weight, and how they're handling any negative emotions, how they're handling some situations that are not healthy for them. How are they handling it, and what are some alternatives? And we just go from there. And it's different with everybody, but the first session is almost always a lot of listening, talking about what they want, what do they want to work toward, and how I can help them with that. And then we just go from there and see how many sessions we want to work on or meet, that we want to have together. And some people, I've worked with some people for just 3 sessions, and I've worked with people for several years. So it really varies.
And so is there, like, in the mental health world, people have feelings about homework. Right?
Oh yeah. Okay. Homework.
So talk to me about what homework looks like, or accountability looks like. I mean, and really truly we're only accountable to ourselves, right? So
Right.
It's a process. It's only as helpful as we allow it to be.
Right.
So, like, but there's some accountability there. So what does that look, what does homework look like from a dietitian?
Okay. Well, that's a very good question. And it really, really varies from person to person. Okay. When I work with somebody who has a lot of shame around eating, then we really do work on the self-talk, and I have them write down some of the actual statements, things that they are saying to themselves. And I have them kind of keep track of how did they handle that situation. What was their response? What did they do? How did that work for them? And in the platform that I use, there is a place also to keep track of hunger and fullness. And so that's something I do with almost everybody, not everybody, but I would say 80 to 90% of the people that I work with, I have them just track hunger and fullness, rate their hunger and fullness on a scale of 1 to 10, and satisfaction, and put it into this online platform that I use, so that they just become more attuned with what their body is telling them. And if we're working on intuitive eating and health at every size, I also will have them write down what they ate, but not from a standpoint of me looking to say, oh, did they get enough carbs? Did they get enough, calcium or whatever? I'm not looking at that at all. I want them to learn that, gosh, if I have this meal, it's not very satisfying. And then I find I'm eating more mindlessly later on because it just didn't satisfy me. Or the opposite, they find that a certain meal was very filling. And we talk a lot about their meals and their internal cues for hunger and fullness. So I do have people log that, you know,
Mhm.
for maybe 3 to 7 days. Um, for athletes that come in, uh, some I see some athletes that come in with low energy, not having the energy to complete workouts. I do have them record their food intake so that I can make sure they are eating enough and enough carbohydrates and getting the nutrients that their bodies need to function at the level that they want to function.
Mhm.
Um, I also have a journal prompt kind of handout and several intuitive eating handouts that I work with people, and I give those to them each week so that they focus on one aspect of intuitive eating
Mhm.
each week.
Mhm.
So yeah, there's definitely homework.
Mhm. But
um,
you're
yeah.
teaching a philosophy though, right? It's a
What's that?
you're teaching a philosophy about food and eating. So, from that sense, it makes sense that
Yeah. Well,
we.
and yeah, and intuitive eating has 10 principles. And so if somebody comes to me for that,
Mhm.
or who wants to stop this whole diet cycle, losing, regain, and they want to stop all of that, then
Mhm.
we will definitely go through each principle of intuitive eating. And there is a intuitive eating workbook that that was developed by the two dietitians who wrote the intuitive eating book that I
Mhm.
use with people. It is very in depth,
Yeah.
and we spend sometimes weeks on one principle of
Mhm.
intuitive eating.
Mhm.
And we meet once a week for an hour by Zoom and
Mhm.
go through the workbook. And I've worked with a lot of people with that workbook, and I think it's life changing. I
Mhm.
mean, it really is life changing,
Mhm.
but it takes time.
Mhm.
And it takes, I think, working with somebody who's gone through it themselves, which I did, many years ago. And there's lots of other dietitians who do the same kind of work. So,
Mhm.
uh, I'm not just saying it's me. There's a
Yeah.
lot of dietitians who do this, but um, yeah, it's great. It's really, um, I think, important work, and it's a process that for a lot of people truly will change their lives.
Mhm. So one of the things that we see at Prism, sort of two things, but with the same, I guess, consequence, is that like we work with a lot of people who have ADHD, and so they'll eat because they require more external stimulation to like get the reward center of their brain going, right? And so we've got some disordered eating in that sense. And then we also work with a lot of transgender and non-binary folks who like more or less shut off their connection with their body as a means of survival, right? And so it
Yes.
it seems to me from a mental health perspective that like those would be two sort of challenging populations to work with for different reasons, but like it has to do intuitive eating specifically has to do with being embodied, right?
Yeah.
Aware of your cues and aware of what's happening. And so how would you work? We'll divide it up. So
Yeah.
how would you work with someone who has ADHD and one of their mechanisms for like pinging off that reward center in the brain is food? We'll start with that one.
That's a very good question, and that can also be challenging and highly individualized
Yeah.
because lots of issues. I have a dear friend of mine who has pretty severe ADHD,
Mm-hmm.
and we've had many conversations about this. I think that it's still very important to help the person that I'm working with tune in
Mm-hmm.
to those internal cues. So really pay attention to learn what that feels like to be hungry
Mm-hmm.
and to be full and satisfied. And I know there are medications that can sometimes circumvent
Yep.
that.
Yep.
So it is a little bit more difficult, but it still can be done where they can learn to feel somewhat hungry and be able to then stop when they're full. Because a lot of the meds for ADHD actually kind of reduce hunger.
Breast hunger, yeah.
So, but um, they still can
Mm-hmm.
feel feelings of hunger, but it does take more effort
Mm-hmm.
to feel that. And in some cases, and I'm also thinking of my friend, she has to kind of have a schedule
Mm-hmm.
and a like an eating plan.
Mm-hmm.
And so like she knows that she does need to eat in the morning, even though she may not be super hungry, but that she knows she will feel better, function better if she has something to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And then so she has kind of like this schedule laid out as to when she should probably eat. Now granted, it kind of is not exactly intuitive eating, because sometimes she needs to eat 4 hours after breakfast. She may not be hungry. Just some
Right.
also
Yeah.
saying a lot of people with ADHD may not feel hungry.
Mm-hmm.
So they may have to kind of do a hybrid
Yeah.
thing where they still learn. It's still important to pay attention to what our body is telling us, and learning to respect that,
Mm-hmm.
and to pay attention to it, but also acknowledging that they may not have those strong feelings of hunger, but their body will function better, will be healthier
Mm-hmm.
if they eat. So it's a little bit of both.
So it seems like maybe they would be looking for different cues, right? Like maybe
Yes.
they would be looking for an energy drop
Yeah,
or
exactly. That's a good point. Yes, an energy drop, especially like a blood sugar drop. If they start to feel lightheaded and they start to feel cranky, even
Mhm.
though they're, yeah, I don't really feel hungry, but gosh, I'm cranky, or I feel kind of faint or lightheaded or thirsty.
Mhm.
That's a good cue that you need to get something to eat.
Sure.
And yeah, so that's definitely something that I talk to them about for sure.
Right. Cool. And so now we're going to swap over to the other question because I have a bad habit of stacking my. So let's um, talk a little bit about how you might work with folks who don't have um, who might be trans or non-binary, and so they like cut off that connection with their body until they're in a place where they're transitioning or feeling more affirmed in their gender presentation, their physical experience. How do you encourage someone to be embodied enough to notice hunger cues, right, or energy cues or whatever we're looking for, while also you know I guess holding space or empathy for like there could possibly be some suffering there. How do we balance those things?
That's also an excellent question. And again, comes back to individualization, because everybody's so different. And they come to me with there's a wide variety of beliefs about food and body and health.
Mm-hmm.
So after kind of finding out more about where they are with that, it still comes back to the basic um, well, I think for some people it almost starts more with learning to respect their body and their body's cues than to actually pay attention to them, because I'm thinking of a few clients who have had so much shame, or have, like you said, have cut off all feelings, and have kind of lost that respect for their body,
Mm-hmm.
and belief that any feelings that they have is normal, and that they're okay. So in that situation, it definitely is better to work as a team with a
Mm-hmm.
therapist and a dietitian together
Yeah.
is such a great team, because some of that the therapist would have to take on, because that's
Right.
their skill and not mine.
Mm-hmm.
But it could be it's a great way to help somebody to learn that those feelings and sensations and the various kinds of drives that they have is normal and healthy, um, and is a good thing. It's not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
and to respond to those cues and learn that it's okay,
Mm-hmm.
that it is okay to feel hungry. It's just like it's okay to have, the sexual feelings that maybe they think are not right or
Mm-hmm.
shameful or whatever, and a therapist would work with them on that.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing with food and bodily cues, for hunger and fullness and satisfaction. It still comes back to tuning in
Yeah.
and being present and listening to their body and respecting what their body says, and that it's normal to have a lot of these feelings that they have. I think some of the people I'm thinking of, they it's so entrenched in them that their feelings are wrong, and they shouldn't be feeling that way. And
Mm-hmm.
that's that. So it takes time, but it still does come back to paying attention and becoming attuned with what the body is telling them.
Mm-hmm. So I'm hearing two things. Um, oh Lord, did I lose them? I've still got one. The, the first one, right, and I think the most important one is that these are regard. Oh, here we go. A, around, like gender stuff and also food, there is immense amount of unlearning that we have to do, right?
Yes.
In order to be, at least from a gender perspective, like in order to be the most genuine version of yourself, you have to unlearn like complicit heteronormativity and all of the things that we were told about the way that we were supposed to be and do things and present and like all of that, right?
Yes,
So
that's yeah, go ahead.
that also applies to food too, though. Like we have
Oh,
to learn all of these, the
oh
rules,
yes.
factors, right? So like I think that there's a similarity there. And then second point, somewhat related, is that hunger cues, like basic physiological cues that are what you really are working with and teaching people to acknowledge, and embrace, are literally something for everybody, right? Like every
Yeah.
body,
Every
you know,
body.
right?
Exactly.
So like, yes, you may feel disdain for your body for whatever reason, and also this cue that you're having, everybody else experiences it too because
Exactly.
everybody's body, right?
Right.
And so then we come back to that unlearning piece.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes. There's
yeah.
a lot of unlearning. I mean, the one that I spend a lot of time on that comes to my mind first is the belief that we have to finish everything on our plate.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of us, myself included, was taught from the get-go that you need to eat everything that's on your plate, finish everything on your plate, which basically tells you to ignore hunger and fullness.
Right.
Eat, you should eat only what's on your plate, and finish everything regardless if you're full or not. So we have to unlearn that you really should eat the amount of food it takes for you to become comfortably full and satisfied. Some days it's going to be a small amount, some days it's going to be a large amount.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the same every day. And that's another thing that I find people have myths about intuitive eating, that intuitive eating means that you're going to be eating this, the same amount every day. It's not the case at all. There's so much that it goes into our appetite.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, that's unlearning of a rule right there, that normal eating, intuitive eating, is flexible. It's very flexible, and it kind of, waxes and wanes, and there's a lot of variables that go into it, but it always comes back to paying attention to what your body is telling you,
Mm-hmm.
which is a thing that I think everybody can benefit from.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think you answered all my questions.
Oh, that's amazing.
Is there anything else, just as a closing, that you would like to share that you think is important? Yeah, just any closing statement or thought you might have.
I think that it's important to find what's right for you,
Mm-hmm.
and to be a little suspicious, I guess, or suspect of some of the traditional views that are out there, when it comes to food and eating and really anything,
Mhm.
to question it and to listen to what you think and feel and what your body is telling you, and start from there.
Mhm.
And then you can listen and decide what works best for you in terms of the advice you're given. But
Mhm.
to always listen to what your body is telling you, what
Mhm.
your gut, both metaphorically and literally,
Mhm.
is telling you, and go from there.
Right on. Well, cool. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. It was
It was
great. It's good to
fun.
see you.
You too. It looks much colder where you are than it is.
I'm at 9,600 feet, and we just got, I think, 4 more inches of snow, which is good though. I'm in Colorado, and that's a good thing. Snow is a good thing.
It's like 75 here in Austin.
Oh my gosh.
Unseasonably warm, but I'll take it. I can go outside
Yes.
today.
Yes.
Well, I hope you have a lovely day. Thank you again for your
Thank,
time, and
thank you.
we'll talk soon. Have a good one.
Okay. Sounds good. Bye bye.